Welcome to More Than a Few Words, marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And today we're going to help you get organized, get you thinking about marketing themes that you can use across platforms. And to have that conversation, I've invited Sally Loftus to join me. Sally is a consultant specializing in human resources, organization improvement, and social change. And she's made significant contributions in the realm of pay equity, which includes her new book, The Pay Equity Guide for Nonprofit Organizations. And I really want to encourage you to check out Sally's work in that area. And there'll be links in the show notes. But today, we're going to talk about some of her marketing tips. Sally, welcome to the show. Sally, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you because I love this idea of exploring themes in marketing. But from your perspective, tell me why you think that's important.
Yes, I will say, as a small business owner myself, I am, an employee of one and use a group of kind of contractors, but I also have started a business in the last 5 years. And so every year I feel like I kind of get better at marketing. And one thing I've seen is with my clients is that everyone needs a different level of maybe information about potential products or ways we can work together. And so I'm able to do that through kind of these themes that I use in my marketing throughout the year.
So, when you talk about themes,
Mhm.
from your business perspective, what kind of themes do you work around? And then we can explore how does that look on social media, on your newsletter, on your website. But what kind of themes do you tend to focus on?
Yeah, I try to keep it within the buckets of my work, which are human resources, organization improvement, and social change. Now, if you look at those are pretty broad topics, and the way people define them vary. But what I try to do is use each of those as, kind of the ways that I could work with people, but also share insights that I'm seeing as I'm working with my clients that other people might want to hear or engage in. So maybe they'll follow my business more.
The idea of taking your areas of expertise and kind of making each one of those a theme really gives you an opportunity to rotate through your product offerings.
Absolutely, and in different ways. So,
Mhm.
sometimes that might be based on something that's happening in the world.
Mhm.
Sometimes that might be based on different things that are happening. So, for instance, I do a lot of work within pay equity around human resources. So, I typically am publishing things around equal pay days or anything, around. I kind of plan at the beginning of the year and have an idea when those are going to be
Mhm.
and plan marketing and thought pieces, things like that. And then sometimes it's just kind of, I've scheduled it out and, I'm going to focus on organization assessments this month and kind of really dig deep there.
The idea of themes is something that we played with a lot of our clients. You wouldn't think about it, but we had a client that sold beans in glass jars. And so every month we had a different bean that we featured and we did
Mm.
recipes around
Mhm,
those
mhm,
beans. But
mhm,
we also had to think about, okay, it's summer. People don't really want
mhm,
chili, but we can do
mhm,
a light bean salad. So looking at both your products
mhm.
and the things happening in the outside world is so important. Now, I imagine in your industry, there's a lot of regulatory changes and things like that that can fuel your content.
Absolutely. And, a couple of things there. One is, typically, for instance, like in January, I'm usually doing, like you said, a lot of regulatory updates around
Mhm.
HR because I know when I was an HR manager, that was my practice was in January, kind of, updating those things. But also to your point around the summer, I've looked at my LinkedIn analytics and know that just less people are engaged in the
Mhm.
summer. So I try to do lighter content, try to do some other, specifically in like July and August to really but also really speak to kind of where they are from an engagement level. So, yeah, it's definitely kind of, constantly monitoring and doing some planning at the same time.
Okay, so I have my themes. I've mapped out the year. I'm going to talk about this service in January, this
Mhm,
service in February. I'm going to feature these industry changes and updates because there are a lot of big conferences in March, whatever it is.
mhm,
Now I have my theme. How
Mhm.
do I evaluate my content? How do I adjust for
Mhm.
email, for my website,
Mhm.
for social
Mhm.
media?
Yeah, those are great questions. I will say one is just really kind of looking at the different ways that people interact with content. So, some people are really interested in maybe audio only, right? Or maybe like a 1 minute video, or they want to go deeper. So, what I try to do is really look at the theme and then figure out across my social media platforms and emails and newsletters and things like that, and try to find ways that there are ways people can skim the content, there are ways people can go deeper. And then sometimes I'll also offer free events for people who want to dive even deeper into it.
Mhm.
So, again, it's kind of like chunking, maybe,
Mhm.
the content in ways that there's a lot of different ways people can access it and interact with it. That's based on kind of what their learning and engagement needs are.
I always love to do the long form content first. So whether it's an episode of a podcast or just a blog
Mhm,
post, because then
mhm,
you can kind of pull pieces.
mhm,
And I do little teasers in my newsletter. I do little bites on social media, though I
mhm.
have found that LinkedIn kind of likes long content.
I feel like it varies, right? On LinkedIn. And that's something I have to do in my own practice. My business is kind of, stay plugged into what the trends are, right?
Hmm.
On an annual basis, and then kind of figure out again, I have like LinkedIn Premium, so I'm able to see kind of more detail around how people are engaging. So I definitely go into my own analytics to see that. But I love your point around the longer content. So, for instance, I have a monthly newsletter called Fully Human Resources on LinkedIn. And that is kind of like my big theme, my longer form stuff. But typically that helps me, like if I have a topic within there, let's say employee handbooks, right? I kind of then have some ways that I can create things throughout the month and share them.
Hmm.
That the long form's the newsletter, but there's a lot of content within that that people can kind of sparse out as they need.
I also think that, as you're talking about breaking up those bigger pieces, not everybody sees the content. I mean, and you know this from your
Mhm,
analytics. Not everybody that follows you sees the content the first time you release it. And so
mhm,
revisiting it with a new
mhm,
headline is a
mhm.
great way to re engage.
Absolutely. I have old blog posts that I go back and maybe update and, we'll put
Hmm.
updated here and add some learnings, things like that. I think, one of the things that I've learned the most about LinkedIn is that you get more engagement the more engaged you are. So,
Hmm.
typically in less busy times, I'm usually in there on my social media trying to react, comment, things like that, because that also naturally drives my content into other people's algorithm.
Absolutely. And I know we've been talking a lot about LinkedIn, but what
Mhm,
about when you're repurposing for Instagram or
mhm,
YouTube? What
mhm.
kind of things do you keep in mind when you're moving to those platforms on the same themes?
Yeah, that's such a great question and something I continue to explore. I feel like LinkedIn, I try to do more of like a corporate type business,
Hmm.
thinking their flavor, I'll call it,
Hmm.
of my marketing. Instagram is a lot more personal. I do a lot more videos, shorts, things like that there. YouTube, I do a mixture of longer form, shorter form, things like that. My monthly newsletter, again, I try to make it, my monthly email newsletter, I try to make it something where people can skim, but then also, dig deeper. But yeah, definitely pull stuff out of the archives, update it, or maybe try to make things that are more season proof, maybe
Hmm.
future proof, that I can use. I use Canva all the time. So thinking about different ways I can repurpose content.
Absolutely. And you touched on something there, this idea of season proof or future proof.
Hmm.
There are topics that are one and done. The
Hmm.
2025 predictions, the 25 predictions for
Hmm.
2025
Hmm.
is not going to be relevant in
Hmm.
June.
Hmm.
But tips on how to evaluate pay or how to do things, that's that wonderful evergreen that is the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely, and I think about sometimes when I'm working with a client, I'll think, "Oh, I wish I had a blog post that talked about this," so
Hmm.
then I'll create a blog post, and so it's something that I can then layer into my proposals. I have, again, kinda as an archived place that I can pull content from to make other things, so there's just a lot of different ways to do this.
Absolutely. And the more content that you have, the more flexibility I think you have to repurpose, reuse, reshare, and that whole repeat, rinse, repeat, and reuse.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think there's always ways that you can go back and kinda update things on insights, and being vulnerable, and you're saying, "Hey, I wrote this 2 years ago, and here's what I've learned from that,
Hmm.
and I've updated it," I think helps people see your own development and learning, or it brings a level of curiosity maybe they didn't have before.
Absolutely. Well, Sally, this has been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me, I've really enjoyed it.
Me too. If you're curious about Sally, there will be links in the show notes to her LinkedIn profile, her website, Instagram, and definitely check it out, not just for how she uses content, but also if you're in the area of payroll and human resources, she's got great content there too. Thanks, Sally.
Thank you.
And if you've enjoyed this conversation and you'd like to find other resources for your business, be sure to check out morethanafewwords.com. There you'll find hundreds of conversations in our archives, workbooks, webinars, white papers, and so much more. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.